how can women, like especially women of color and black women, really advocate for themselves more through the pregnancy process when we're in this culture? Like what can they be like? What questions do they need to be asking their doctors? How can they really feel more empowered around the entire pregnancy and birthing process?
Yeah, well, I think first, like, you mentioned Shaija Washington. I think that, for instance, her situation, being in Brooklyn, going into the hospital for being admitted for elevated blood pressure, being there for a few days, being administered an epidural after refusing it, and then ending up dead. Like, it doesn't make sense. There's information coming out. There's some investigation happening, but at the same time, there's no accountability. You know,
Mm.
and so I think that what's really important and what has to be noted here is and underscored, I think, is that you know it's not it's not incumbent upon, or shouldn't be incumbent upon, Black and brown people to defend themselves in spaces that they should be safe, right? Like,
Mm.
we should be designing spaces to be safe for everyone. And the fact that they aren't is really critical for us to look at, but also it's critical for us to have alternatives, right? So if we're sending people into hospitals as if that's the only place where somebody can have a baby, it's not, right? So I think we need to educate that there are out of hospital birth options available to people who are low risk, right?
Mm.
Many people fall into a low risk category who can do home birth or birth center births, right? You can also work with midwives at home, in the hospital, or in birth centers, depending on where you're located. Your local hospital may have midwives on staff, depends, right? But you want to look and do the research and make sure that you make a choice that's aligned with your values. That's number one. Understanding that, economics really complicate things. And so whether you have access to a private insurance versus Medicaid, or, state insurances that are available to you, um, I mean, it changes things, right? You might have the inconsistency of providers. Your provider might change, at the last minute because, your insurance, if they could get like a patient that's going to be able to pay, out of pocket, or pay for a service, it's easier to get that money than it is to try to get it from someone who may or may not be able to, based on their insurance. I think also, you know, for people who are coming in and understanding that in this climate, having advocacy tools is critically important to help you navigate this experience of moving through your pregnancy and going into the postpartum experience, including the birth. Understanding how to speak up for yourself, what to ask for, how to engage with providers is critically important. Understanding what consent means inside of birth spaces
Mm.
is critically important. How to use informed consent as a model to make sure that you understand procedures prior to them being administered, um, not treatments after they've been administered. Understanding, what the patient advocacy safety net looks like for you in the birth process is critically important. And also understanding what it means to have other people there, right? Like, do you need your own, like, birth partner, right? Whether that's your lover, your sister, whether it's your mother, a cousin, a friend, um, whoever will be going with you, like, that's important to make sure they're educated as well. And then having access to a doula, and doulas are accessible. I know that there's a narrative that doulas are expensive, or for the 1%, or whatever. I don't know where that came from, but that's been something that's been sort of pervasive, this idea that, it's expensive to hire a doula. But because I think a lot of people who have been in the public eye that have used doulas, I think people think that, oh, it must be like an expensive service. It's not. It can be on a sliding scale. You can have people who will work for free up to, whatever amount, right? And so if you are to say to someone, look, I can only afford XYZ, it's incumbent upon that doula to share with you what they can do based on that fee structure, um, or connect you to someone else who can work with you, right?
Mm.
So it doesn't mean that you get less of a service because you're paying less money than someone else. It means that you're getting a full service, and that full service is delivered to you, with the exchange of energy or of money, right? And
Right.
so whatever that looks like. But I think for people to understand that they have a pathway to support, and they have pathway to resources is really important. Education through attending webinars and online classes can be such a great way to further elucidate your knowledge around what's possible and what the experience can be. Touring the hospital, finding out their C-section rate, um, looking at the list of providers, and making sure that you feel like you have someone who's culturally competent. Not everybody can understand you and your values. Not every doctor, just because they're skilled, um, can really be the best fit for you, right? And so having the courage and knowing when it's time to, like, switch or to explore other options is also important. So I think, like, there's so many things we can do, but again, I want to underscore that it should not be incumbent upon the people who are underserved and who are under the most threat to have to fight for their existence, right?
Right.
Um, to have to challenge this notion that they matter.